That's 9 a.m. Good morning, everyone. I declare this Kempsey Shire Council meeting open. It is the 18th of July 2023. I remind all people attending this meeting that it is being webcast on YouTube with audio and vision. A recording of the meeting is available on the internet and is required to be available for 12 months. Private recordings, including taking photographs by members of the public gallery, are not allowed. This disallowance of recordings, which includes taking photographs, is to maintain the integrity of the meeting's proceedings. The only exception to that is media, who may or may not attend. All members of the Kempsey Shire community are welcome to attend council meetings to observe. Please refrain from interjecting or undertaking any behaviour that will stop councillors from undertaking their important tasks of decision making. And welcome members of the media. Please ensure all devices like mobile phones are in silent mode. On behalf of the Council, I welcome all people in the public gallery and observing live on the internet to our meeting today. Councillors in attendance are Councillor Scott Butterfield, Councillor Simon Ferguson, Councillor Arthur Bain, Councillor Kerry Riddington, Councillor Alexandra Wyatt, Councillor Dean Saul. And online we have Councillor Anthony Patterson and Deputy Mayor and Councillor Kenny Ring. Council staff in attendance are Mr Craig Milburn, General Manager, Mr Wes Trotter, Director of Utilities, Mr Michael Jackson, Director of Operations and Planning, Mr Steve Mitchell, Director Corporate and Commercial, Mr Daniel Thorogood, Manager Governance and Information Services, Ms Mel Pedersen, Coordinator Governance and Information Services, and Sean Hunter, Governance and Information Services. Councillors, we have some very important and essential decisions to make today. I remind all of us of our oath of office when we commence the role of councillor, and that is on page 3 of the agenda. And councillors either swore or affirmed that they will undertake the duties of the office of councillor in the best interest of the people of the Kempsey local government area and Kempsey Shire Council. And that is quite important, that we understand our role in what we are doing here today and making these decisions. Thank you all for your respectful debate on the issues at past meetings, and I hope we can continue to do so today. We'll now commence the meeting, and I'll present the opening prayer. Dear Lord, help us in our deliberations today so that our decisions will be for the greater good for the whole of Kempsey Shire. Amen. I invite a councillor to volunteer to do acknowledgement of country. Councillor Bain, thank you.
Manjunga kai malamangu, tangati tut, pari dit. Dan didn't ja malangat. Malangu. I said, good morning, my name's Arthur. This is Dungutty country. From the river, the hills and plains, from the mountains to the ocean. This is Dungutty country. And you'll all be well in this place. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bain. I invite a councillor to do acknowledgement of servicemen, women and families. Councillor Riddington.
Thank you, Mayor. Kempsey Council acknowledges the sacrifices made by Australian service men and women and their families in all areas and theatres of war, including our Australian wars from colonisation upward. In particular, those who gave their lives in defence of the freedoms we enjoy today.
Thank you, Councillor Riddington. We have two councillors on audio-visual link at the moment, and I now ask someone to move that the council permit Councillor Patterson and Ring to attend this meeting by audio-visual link for the reason that they are both currently outside of the local government area. That's moved by Councillor Ferguson, seconded by Councillor Saul. And we're having a technical problem with Councillor Patterson at the moment, and I'm not too sure why his video is not coming in. But there's the motion. Is there any debate? If not, I'll move the motion. Is there any dissent from allowing Councillors Patterson and Ring to attend by audio-visual link? There is no dissent. I declare that carried. We now move to the recommendation number 5, that we affirm the minutes of the ordinary meeting of Kempsey Shire Council held on the 27th of June. Do we have a mover? Councillor Butterfield. Seconder, Councillor Bain. Any debate? No, thank you. I asked, is there any dissent on that motion? If not, I declare it carried. Do any councillors have a disclosure of interest? No, thank you. Before we go into items passed by exception, I would just like the General Manager to outline what will be happening at 10 o'clock, if he could, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. 10 o'clock, part of a previous council resolution was to seek to have one of our school groups to come and interact with our councillors around some Ngungati language. So this morning at around 10 o'clock, the East Kempsey Primary School will be here, and they will actually do some interacting with the councillors. So the Mayor will adjourn the meeting at 10 when we start that, or thereabouts, depending on where the debate is. The school students will interact with the councillors and staff on that, and then we'll join them for morning tea as well.
Thank you, Mr. General Manager. We move on to item 7, which is items passed by exception. There are 4 items there, and I'll be withdrawing 10.2, which is Kemp Street Sports Complex Master Plan amendments. Councillor Bain.
Nothing, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to remove 10.3, the disposal of surplus land.
Thank you. Are there any other removals? Councillor Ring, could you just show me that you can put your hand up, because Councillor, no, with the software. Do you know how to do that? Councillor Patterson, you know how to put your hand up? Yes. Thank you. I just need to see that that's working, because I'll be looking at the screen every time I'm asking for input from councillors, just to see whether either of our councillors online wanted to contribute. Thank you. Now, are there any further withdrawals of items passed by exception? If there are only 2 items left, statement of cash and investments, June 2023, and legal matters. Any questions on statement of cash and investments? There isn't. And if you had legal matter questions, you would have to ask them in confidential. There'll be no confidential if we pass this. Thank you. There are 2 items in the items passed by exception. Do we have any dissent? Oh, we need a mover. I'm sorry. I apologise. We need a mover. Councillor Ring. Riddington. Not my day already. Thank you. Do we have a seconder, please? Councillor Saul. Thank you. I'll now put the motion. I apologise again for getting things back to front. Is there any dissent? No dissent? Carried. Do we have any procedural motions, please, on bringing an item forward? Councillor Bain.
Yes, considering that there's people in the public gallery who are concerned of the Crescent Head and the voice issues, I would propose that we bring the Crescent Head matter and the voice notice of motion forward. I'd move that way.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder for that? Councillor Riddington. It's a procedural motion, so there's no debate. Is there any dissent on the procedural motion? I declare it carried. So instead of going to 10.1, we're going to, going to 11.1, which is reports from councillors, notice of motion, maintenance shed at Crescent Head Holiday Park. Councillor Wyatt, you have proposed this. Do you have anything you wish to say at the beginning?
Yes, please. I just want to make a procedural matter. And I want to move both items. I want to deal with the items as separate issues. Or separate motions.
Thank you very much, Councillor Wyatt. I have your understand.
Yeah,
I understand
part one
that.
and part two.
Yeah.
Do we need a motion to that effect, Mr. Thorogood? No. So you can move the first part and talk to that, and then you move the second part after that when we decided on the first part, Councillor Wyatt. So would you like to move?
Yes, please. Yes, please. I move. I can't see. Yes, I move that.
Number one.
Remove
Yep.
that.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder for that? Councillor Riddington. Councillor White, would you like to speak to your motion, please?
Yes, please. This motion was I prepared this motion because when I saw the shed soon after the walls and the roof went on, I was disappointed, alarmed, and astonished. I kind of moved through those emotions. First, I was disappointed. I drive down to the beach several times a week. The anticipation of driving around that roundabout past the trees and then to get a glimpse of the ocean and the beach conditions, and for me and others, which I heard in the community, it sets your expectations for what, for me, my walk is going to be like on the beach, whether it's going to be horrible or windswept or beautiful. It really does set up your expectation of what you're going to experience when you get there. And that's important in recreation planning. I was alarmed, and when I put my professional hat on, I thought, what on earth were they thinking? And I thought, what kind of project development, what work planning approval process permitted that shed in that location? New South Wales planning law says that, all works and infrastructure from a carport to a house to subdividing land is a development that's a scale from large to small, but there is a planning process, and you have to consider environmental, economic, social, and community values. Not all of those developments in that scale do require a legislative community consultation. So I was just wondering, okay, so what is the planning approval that approved that? And I was thinking sort of at that time that, I might be playing some kind of advocacy, some kind of mediation role. But then came a whole lot of texts and emails and Facebook messages and comments, and I figured out that there must be an approval process. So what was it? So is that approval process management plan, agreement, Crown lease agreement, risk assessment, EIA? What kind of assessment process? What was the decision-making process around it? This is public lands being managed by Kempsey Shire Council to operate as a caravan park, but it is essentially publicly owned land by and for the people of New South Wales and our visitors. So I thought there must be a decision-making process, and it should be transparent. And at that point, I was wondering, getting the information that I needed to whether I was going to be in an informing role or an advocacy role. But then I sort of started to become astounded because the more emails and text messages and Facebook comments I got, I just realised it was overwhelming. And I really felt that council did not read the room correctly. Councillors have received 32 emails opposing the shed and supporting the notion. It's from a really diverse group of people who have been in the past on opposing sides of the argument. And we received one dissenting email suggesting that the quote, this is not me, quote, that the community has blown it out of the water by those who feel that it's own place. And that it's important that the poor crocs can't tolerate a different look and the temporary inconvenience of their beach. A bit of landscaping round the shed and you won't even notice it, apart from those who gleefully sit on the smoker's balcony awaiting the next caravan arrival with scantily clad fluid gender hippie campers. Quote unquote. So there's 32 emails plus a heap of Facebook groups. I think we all have a love-hate relationship with Facebook. But as one person said in relation to the GM's comments, that there's 3 complaints at the time of writing, is that this comment implies that only posts or comments are not relevant and inconsistent with Kempsey Shire Council's use of social media to inform communicating council. Like council uses social media to inform. Why shouldn't council use social media to get information back? And then this one from somebody that's lived in the Valley for 50 years and has been an advocate of community, said he was extremely disappointed at council's lack of consideration regarding the structure. And it said that unfortunately this decision leaves me totally confused and defenceless with council's actions. We've also had an email from our local MP, whilst he doesn't acknowledge, he acknowledged it's not his role, to sort of influence council. He out there went on his own time to go and canvass 25 random people with near unanimous support that the shed be removed. And then yesterday we had a large turnout, and the 2 speakers talked about being disappointed and shocked and bewildered and disillusioned, especially in regards to our intent with our strategic documents, such as local character statement, growth management plan, which referred to retaining amenity, building heights and values. I believe that we have no other reasonable option other than to relocate its shed, and it's my opinion that we did not read the room correctly in terms of public objection. It does impact on visual amenities and the viewscape. It does not sit comfortably within its landscape setting. In other words, it is an eyesore. It does impact on people's experiences of being in and around the space, from the club, from the road, and from the caravan park. And people's safety concerns are real.
Thank you, Councillor Wyatt. Councillor Ferguson, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to move an amendment, if possible.
You can move an amendment.
I'd like to note the concerns raised by the community, and that they're hoping Daniel's got the wording that I've sent through. But I'd like to note the concerns raised by the community, and we do acknowledge that we need to improve informing the community. But yeah, if we can reduce the height of the shed to minimise impacts on the views and complete the landscapes and realign the pathway, given our financial position, that might be a better way to go. But hopefully Daniel's got the wording of all of that in a better way that I've sent through.
That's your amendment. Do we have a second for that amendment? Councillor Saul. You'd like to speak to your amendment, please, Councillor Ferguson?
Yeah, I don't live in that area, but when I first drove down, I did see the shed was a very big visual block. I do note the concerns raised by the community and think they're very well founded. And obviously we do need to make improvements to that consultation process. The cost of removing the shed to another site, as well as removal of a slab, the actual shed itself, I build sheds, is not too bad, but removing a concrete slab that's been put in there is quite a significant job. And I'm hoping that we could find some sort of common ground here where we could let the work that's been done remain there. But I'm open to discussion on it. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ferguson. Do we have another speaker? Councillor Riddington, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Could I please move that we move into committee of the whole to have a proper discussion on this? Thank you.
You certainly can move that. Do we have a seconder for that procedural motion? Councillor Bain. I'll put that procedural motion. Is there any dissent? There's no dissent. I declare that's carried, and we're now in committee of the whole, where that means you can speak often as you like, and but you still have time limits, and you still have to follow the procedure of taking your turn to speak. So the only light on I have at the moment is Councillor Patterson. Yes. Oh,
That was on before.
sorry, I apologise, Councillor Patterson. Councillor Riddington, I thought you were moving a procedural motion. That's why the light was on.
Yeah,
I didn't know you wanted to speak.
I do.
Okay. So, Councillor Patterson, you go after Councillor Riddington if you don't mind. Thank you, Councillor Riddington.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Firstly, I'd like to thank both speakers who came along last night for their very informative presentation, especially when you are residents of Crescent Head and you do know what you're talking about. I went to Crescent Head last Thursday to look for myself on my own and wandered around the community. I feel that this shed, unfortunately, has been mistakenly positioned where it is for whatever reason. I don't really want to delve into the whys, wherefores, hows, but I do think when you
Councillor Riddington, sorry to interrupt you, but we've gone into committee of the whole on this amendment. You could talk to that as well, okay?
Both. I'm going to talk about both.
Well, no, talk about this amendment at the moment, okay? That's how the
which amendment am I talking about? The second
one that's on the screen. That's moved by Councillor Ferguson.
Oh, when do we get to talk about the other one?
Well, that if this is passed, it becomes a motion. If it's defeated, we get to speak about the original motion.
Oh,
sorry. That's how we work this.
Yeah, that wasn't my understanding. I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor, from the advice I received earlier.
Okay, you can still allude to the actual motion, but we've got to address the issues in this amendment.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for clarifying that. Okay. I really believe that this shed needs to be moved, and I thank Councillor Ferguson for the amendment. I really do. It's a hard thing to get your head around, especially when you have figures like $250,000 being quoted, which I do think is excessive. I would really like to see the shed moved to an agreed site. Perhaps if we talk about, I don't know if I'm allowed to do this, but I'm going to do it anyway. Perhaps if we look at Councillor Wyatt's next motion to form a consultative group in Crescent Head, then perhaps that could be their first project, to work with council to find a suitable site on the actual caravan park itself that won't be costly. Use the slab that's now there for the shed that's blocking everyone's view, and use that as a caravan site. Have income raising. If we're going to lose another site somewhere else, let's use that one. Slab's already there. So I do thank you, Councillor Ferguson, very much for your thoughtfulness. I can't support this amendment.
Councillor Patterson and then Councillor Bain. Councillor Patterson.
Thank you. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I also attended the site a number of times as I work out there continuously, and I was driving in there through the roundabout, and I thought, well, I'm going to be hitting the right in the eyes very shortly with something. I'm looking to the left, trees, shed, ocean, creek, saw it all, no issue at all. So it really, I think the aspect of the shed is dependent on how you look at it. I believe it's a part of what's needed for council sites as a utility. Unfortunately, we need toilets, we need sheds, we need workshops to operate these sites. I also believe that council does a great job on completion of these structures. For instance, the toilet blocks, the 2 toilet blocks that were installed out at Crescent Head recently over the last few years, and the fantastic final result with the landscaping completed. That brings me to the point that the structure isn't complete. I've been building quite a few projects over the years, from house to industrial buildings. Projects always look not real nice while they're in construction. When the site is finished, the landscaping is done, the paths are finished, then that's when the site can be said whether it's right or whether it's wrong. But that's at the finish. as council, we're looking to our community very shortly for a special rate variation. And it really bothers me that some councillors can think that up to 250,000, I said up to, is not an issue, because we'll just use the rest of the money that we must have, because it must come from somewhere. So I don't support the removal of the shed at all. And we need to be accountable for the money that we use as council, as a council organisation. This is ratepayers' money. This is not out of our pockets, unless we're ratepayers like I am and like most of you guys are. This is something that we need to be accountable for. Council staff.
Point of order, Mr. Mayor.
Point of order. Yes. Point of order, councillor.
This is about expenditure of money, Mr. Mayor.
The point of order on, you don't speak while that's being dealt with. Thank you, Councillor Patterson. So we're going to listen to Councillor Bain, and he's going to explain what his point of order is, and then I will rule on it. Councillor Bain, please.
My understanding is Councillor Riddington was advised that we were speaking to the amendment, not to the original motion.
You are correct.
And I'd be looking forward to hearing what Councillor Patterson's point of view is on the amendment to the motion. I clearly understand that he's opposed to the original motion, but we're actually talking about the amendment at the moment.
We are. So, Councillor Patterson, could you contain your remarks to the amendment that's on the screen? Councillor Patterson, I'm still speaking. Can you see the screen, Councillor Patterson?
Yeah.
You can. Okay. So could you just address that, please, in your remarks,
so my
please?
Addressing this part of this, sorry, Mr. Mayor, is an expenditure of ratepayers' money. So is it true? This maybe goes through to the general manager. Is this true that this won't be any cost? Because I'm questioning the cost and the nature of, we can just spend another. This may be up to $40,000 or $50,000. I don't know. I'm questioning the nature of spending extra money for no real reason here. That's what I'm questioning. So can I ask that question through to the General Manager on the costings of this, possibly, Mr. Mayor?
You can, and that you're speaking to the costing of the amendment. Yes, thank you. Mr. General Manager, please.
Through Mr. Mayor, the landscaping and the reinstatement of the path are part of the projects. The slight realignment of the path going around the northeast side as suggested in this would probably extend the length of the path, so there'd be minimal costs involved in that. Reducing the height of the shed, anything from $10,000 to probably $30,000 potentially to actually reduce the height of the shed.
Thank you, Mr. General Manager. Councillor Patterson, we'll now go to Councillor Bain.
Yep.
Nothing new, Mr. Mayor. I see there's three issues that present themselves to me around this. Is that the issue, and I'm thinking, does this amendment address the issue of the views by reducing the height? Is that going to resolve the issue around the views? And I'm not sure about whether that will or not. The realignment of the path, because listening to what was said yesterday, the views and the path are the critical issues. The path being a link between the village centre and the foreshore and along Killick Creek. And I can understand that this is it's an important access for community. So if the path realignment supports that, if the view is the reduction doesn't impede the view, this could be a way forward. And I also support look at this, and I look at the first point, and the second point is about planning, consultation, and process. So we've got the views and the path, but then there's planning, consultation, and process. And I absolutely understand that we have made, as council, we've made an error here, and we know that mistakes happen, and we know that they've happened in the past, and we move through it. But the important thing is that we learn from it, and that we say, let's not let this happen again. Let's make sure that in future there is sufficient planning, consultation, and due processes followed. That I'm still not sure whether I can support this amendment or not. But those are the three issues that stand out for me.
Councillor Butterfield and then Councillor Ferguson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd just like to speak to Councillor Ferguson's amendment to the shed. One, the costing of actually removing the shed opposed to reducing the height, as we spoke about, to increase the views. I think it's massive. Like I said, it was up to 250,000, depending on site chosen, opposed to 10 to 30,000 is a massive thing. And with the funding, council having to pay for it, I think that's probably a better way to go. Sorry. Along with the height of the landscaping, there was concerns of the height of the landscaping may be going higher than the shed and blocking views. Well, we're being told that won't be the case. So that's not going to be an issue. And also the realigning of the footpath to the eastern side of the shed will also fix the issue of safety, as you'll be able to see oncoming traffic. Being 8 km/h shared zone, I think going with Simon's amendment, I think it's a little bit of a win-win in my eyes anyway. Residents sort of get kind of what they wanted, and we're not out of pocket up to 250,000. So I think Simon's amendment, so I will agree with that. Thanks.
Councillor Ferguson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Could I ask through the General Manager possibly, what would be, in his opinion only, a reasonable cost to relocate the shed? And if it did end up on current campsites, the financial implications of that?
Thank you, Councillor Ferguson. Mr. General Manager.
Through Mr. Mayor, I'll answer the first one. I'll go to Mr. Mitchell for the second part. In the GM's comments, we've got the potential cost of up to $250,000. The cost really comes down to the location of the shed. The actual construction of the shed, the slab in the shed, is anything from about $110,000 to $150,000. But the site would then dictate, if you cut it back into a fairly significant bank, as was suggested by one of the speakers last night, you got significant earthworks, significant retaining walls, drainage, those sorts of things. So that goes on top of the cost of the shed. If we've got to move services, depending on the location, there's a lot of internal services there, from water and sewer and those sorts of things. So if we've got to relocate services around that, that adds to the cost of it. So in the time frame we had to pull this report together in response to Councillor White's notice of motion, we were quite conservative in that figure, but it would certainly be anywhere, depending on the site, anything from $100,000 to $250,000, depending totally on the site. Mr. Mitchell outlined a bit about the potential impact on the by actually taking one or more sites.
Thank you, Mr. General Manager. Councillor, sorry, Mr. Mitchell, you had some extra information. I'm sorry.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. So I guess in terms of the impact from a revenue perspective, the average revenue on an annual basis from a tourist site at Crescent Head would be anywhere between $12,000 to $15,000, and we get really obviously pretty high occupancy out of that holiday park. It's a destination that people obviously are keen to come and stay at. So that $12,000 to $15,000 is an impact for one site. Obviously, depending on the size of the shed and where that was relocated, that could take more than one site out of the holiday park. So for every site that you lose, you're sort of losing that money, that $12,000 to $15,000 per site. It's probably worth just sort of clarifying based on some of the discussion last night in the public forum. The holiday parks are run commercially, but they run commercially for community benefit. And I think that's sort of important that these decisions that we will make as staff are always very with best intentions around getting the right outcomes that balance those commercial outcomes and the community outcomes. But the holiday parks are an important income source for council. The income that's generated from the holiday parks contribute to the maintenance and the upgrade of all of our Crown reserves that we manage. And those costs would otherwise have to be funded out of the general fund. So I think that's just an important consideration to make. I know there was some comments around the fact that they are commercial businesses. But it is an important distinction that they are commercial businesses that are run for community benefit, and any reduction in that income, if that was the decision that councils make, that just needs to be made understanding that those costs would need to be funded elsewhere.
Thank you, Mr. Mitchell. Could I follow up with a question on the source of the funding for the shed development at the moment? Is that coming out of council funds, or is that straight out of the contributions that the caravan park makes itself? Is that out of their budget, or is it out of our budget?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. Well, it's all our budget. It's just that the funding for any of those works that are within the holiday parks and on the Crown Reserves that I just mentioned before, where we can, are always funded out of the holiday parks reserve. So the income that's generated from the holiday parks is actually used in terms of for projects such as this.
Thank you, Mr. Mitchell. Councillor Riddington, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. With all due respect to Councillor Ferguson, we were debating this particular motion, not the removal of the shed. I'd like to concentrate on the removal of the shed when we get back to that, if that's all right. My view is I'd like to get a proper estimate of any kind of work to either remove this or I'm not with this at all. Sorry, Simon, I can't do it.
Councillor Wyatt, please.
I just wanted to have a discussion about the finances as well. And, we have one comment in an email that says, we failed to understand why the onus is placed on councillors to identify which projects can be cancelled or deferred. I believe it should be operational matter best resolved by council staff. So we know in the code of meeting, that was an email to us. So, we have this code of meeting practice. I think I finally dawned on me that it is one of the most important documents that a council needs to understand. It's very unfortunate that this comes up for our approval within weeks of being elected, when we really have little chance of understanding it, and it easily trips up new council players, especially me. I've been tripped up by it before. So clause 13.3, would you just explain why it's up to me to have identified this? First part of the question. Second part of the question is 13.3 has an A and B. Has either A or B been met in this regard in terms of providing a report? And then after you've got that, I have a follow-up question, please. Thank you.
Right. Well, first of all, I'll just address the bottom line of the model code of the model code of meeting practice, which is put out by the state government, and there are, well, not just that. That's the old one. The new one specifies that this must happen. Okay, and it says that we must have in our model code of meeting practice those parts. So I don't even think, and I'll ask the general manager, if we voted to remove them, I don't think we could, but that's what I understand is in the model code, that we cannot remove those parts of it that specify funding. Mr. General Manager, could you add to that and clarify, please?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. I don't think Councillor White was asking for it to move. Just so it's in there. This doesn't occur very often in this council. With other councils, it happens a lot where councillors will start moving motions, notices of motion, to put in pet projects and things like that. And the onus, the Office of Local Government in developing the model code, my understanding is that they've wanted to push back the onus on the councillors to be thinking about the impacts of their decisions financially on an organisation. Like I said, here with this council, the relationship, we have a good relationship between the staff and the councillors, and we normally work through these things constructively. So it's not normally too much of an issue here. Have we complied with A or B? In essence, no, we haven't. In this particular case, and it is difficult for councillors to know where these sorts of funds come from. And as an example, Councillor Horville came in today and said, we could do this or potentially use this funding or this funding. I said, well, I know one of those is grant funding, so you definitely can't use that. The other one, I'm not sure. I think we've already let the tender, so we probably aren't going to be able to use that. So the councillors don't have that detailed working knowledge either. So it is difficult for councillors. And in the second part of that, it would require me to defer this matter for me to actually have a look at what potentially could be done, and then bring a report back to a future council meeting. Now, that for me would have been probably the August or September council meetings to find out the work, where are we at with the current budget, what are those options, where can we actually go with that. And I believe that given the community interest in that and the importance of that, I did not want to defer that at all. And I thought we could actually put that up here. We've worked through these processes before collectively, and we have a quarterly budget review that where this can actually be identified in that quarterly budget review process. So technically, have we met A or B? No, we haven't. Practically, what we're trying to do is address the community concerns and get this matter dealt with so the project can be either moved or modified or whatever.
So, Mr. General Manager, just to be clear there, if we pass the amendment or the original motion, would we need to add that the costing would need to go to the quarterly budget review and report back? Was that needed in either motion?
Yeah, through Ms. Smith, you probably add like a 0.6 to this or a 0.2 to Councillor Wyatt's original motion that the finances be reported in the first quarterly budget review.
Yes, so both Councillors Ferguson and all Councillor Wyatt, if it comes to that, would have to speak to that. Yes.
Can I have a follow-up question?
You can still ask another question, Councillor Wyatt. We're still in Committee of the Whole. We can't make a decision, just so to be clear, everyone, we can't make a decision on this amendment till we come out of Committee of the Whole, and then you can move back into Committee of the Whole if you wanted to go on with another amendment or the original motion. So, Councillor Wyatt, please.
Yes, so I thank you for explaining that. As I said, I think it trips us up, certainly trips me up. And I hear what Councillor Patterson is saying about the money. I mean, we are being elected as councillors to oversee or to work with council and to oversee this. I get a bit fatigued about saying we can't do this because of the money, we can't do that because of the money. We do have to take risks, we do have to make decisions, and there's all sorts of criteria other than the money. It doesn't make me happy to say that, we may cost the caravan park X amount of dollars and we might lose X amount of dollars. That's not my dream. But it's also not my dream to be constantly constrained, and made to be feel intimidated because I dare put up a motion that says I'm going to cost the ratepayers $250 grand. $250 grand, we don't have an actual costing. We haven't got a quote on a costing. But part of that, the reason I asked the question about clause 13.3 is that, so I'm proposing that the money comes from item ECOP15 in our delivery operation plan, which is called contract manage the capital improvements of the holiday parks. Specifically, it can come from the $3 million capital program or $500,000 for a cafe container at Horseshoe Bay. So with regards to the cafe container, if that is an option, what is a cafe container at Horseshoe Bay, and what is the status of that project scope for the approval process? Because previous meeting we had to discuss bringing forward some roading budget, so there's precedent there. We can bring forward budget. So can we then defer holiday at this Horseshoe Bay container project? So can you explain what is the cafe container at Horseshoe Bay and what is the status of the project scope and approval process for it?
Mr. General Manager, it's kind of out of scope of what we're dealing with.
Yeah, through.
Hopefully you quickly answer that.
Yeah, through Mr. Mayor. The relevant clause from the Code of Conduct is the implication is you actually identify that when you actually write and submit the notice of motion. But in relation to that, if we're talking about this amendment, we're talking about $10,000 to $30,000. We're not talking about $500,000. So you wouldn't need to pull out that whole project or either of those projects. And as I indicated before, what we'd be doing if this gets up, we'd be looking at probably that area you quoted, which is in relation to the works we'd be doing within the holiday parks to find that money itself. If the original motion gets up, we cannot finalise the costing on that until we know the actual site. The site will dictate, as I said, we don't know if we have to do any significant earthworks, we don't know if we have to move services and things like that. So we simply can't give you a price until we actually know the site on that. And then we'd have to look at what are those sources. And this has previously occurred with council. What we'd normally do is bring that back in a quarterly budget review saying, you resolve this, we're taking the funds from here in a quarterly budget review process.
Thank you. Councillor Riddington, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I know and I take Councillor White's point really to heart. Often in cases, there is the money, and I'm very conscious of the money. I'm on the Internal Review Committee. I'm really conscious of the money. But this particular instance is so outside the scope. I don't think we can put a price on public trust in us, public confidence in what we do. I really think we need to go a long way in repairing the relationship with the people of Crescent Head. And if the mistake is there, we own the mistake, we move on. Now, whether or not we spend 40 grand on reducing the height, which I do not support, or we find out what the actual costs will be and either put it out to tender from the original contractor and take it out of the parks funding, I would like to do that. So that public trust and confidence in us are paramount. We have to be authentic, and we have to talk about what we actually believe in and support the people who put us here.
Thank you, Councillor Riddington. Councillor Ring, thank you. I didn't see your hand, but thank you. Councillor Ring, you unmute. You're ready to go. Thank you.
Yeah, sorry, Leo. Thank you. I just, with this amendment, I really think that it's kind of, I don't know. I think that it's as I've kind of said before, it's a very emotional, it's a very heated issue that the community is facing, and how everyone is feeling. And I'm sure the staff are feeling that way before. When I see something like these projects happen, having some of the experiences I've had, like I think it's too much to say that we can't assume staff just made an off-the-cuff decision and decided to put a shed there, just going, oh, yep, that's a good spot on the map. Like, as we've seen, there's a lot of reasons to put a shed where they've put a shed. And in terms of the financial impact, I do agree with Anthony, like we're about to ask for an interest rate rise. And it's, it's a huge, it is a huge thing to move this shed and to put this on our community. And I know that, like seeing it every day for the people that live there is like a big thing for them. But yeah, I feel like the shed's probably not going to be there forever. Like, does it have a useful life? It's obviously, there's been other places we've stored the equipment before, because the shed hasn't always been where it is now. I like this amendment. I think it's so much lesser of a financial risk, and after seeing the completed works and the landscaping and things like that, I think we should kind of give the staff a chance to kind of show that they know what they're doing. But yeah, so that's what I have to say about that, Matt.
Thank you, Councillor Ring. Councillor Bain, and then Councillor Ferguson again, please.
Morning, Mr. Mayor. I'm very much aware that there's a balance here between community interests, and thank you, Councillor Riddington, for what, who are we here to represent? And thank you, Councillor White, for, I'd really like to hear an answer to the question that Councillor White asked about what is a cafe container and where's that project up to, because we need to know if there is a project that can be pushed back and there is some money that we can do this, then we can absolutely build trust with community, because there is an issue of trust with the Crescent Head community, a very large issue, and this unfortunate event of putting the shed there has just underlined that issue of trust. I mean, what I'm hearing from the community is council only cares about the commercial interests of the holiday park. They don't care about the amenity of the community, and I don't think that's entirely accurate. I don't think it is at all. We do have concern for the community, but we've got to make that apparent and transparent, and be authentic and say, right, okay, let's address this issue. And if it does cost and there's somewhere we can get the money from, then I would appreciate knowing that. So yeah, thank you. I'd like that question answered if I could.
Mr. General Manager, and then Mr. Mitchell are going to help us out with those answers. Thank you.
Yeah, through Mr. Mayor, I'll get Mr. Mitchell to give a specific answer in relation to the container shed. As in previous discussions on these sorts of things, when it comes to finding something, it does simply come down to priorities and where council wants to put dollars. So in something like this, should the original motion get up, then we would go and try and find where that money comes from. And it really is about those priorities. But Mr. Mitchell's got a specific answer about the container.
Yeah, and sorry, through you, Mr. Mayor, just to add on to what the General Manager is mentioned in relation to the sort of program of works of that $3 million for the holiday parks in the current financial year budget. That's largely allocated over projects that essentially were part of the 10-year concept plans for the holiday parks were adopted a couple of years ago. So we've got a program of works over the next sort of 5 to 10 years to deliver. So it would just be a shuffling of those projects that have already been identified as needed within the holiday parks. In relation to Councillor Wyatt's comment around the container cafe, that was an item, as I understand it, was in last year's operational plan. It's not in the operational plan that's just been adopted for this financial year. Unless it's somehow mistakenly included in there. I couldn't find reference to it when I just looked at it then. We had originally 12 months ago identified, is that correct? Yeah, so Councillor White's just confirmed that unfortunately she looked at last year's operational plan. So it was an item that was in last year's operational plan because for the planning for the Horseshoe Bay works out there at that stage, we thought when we needed to do the works in terms of removing the current amenities box and the kiosk out there, that we would need to have a temporary solution. We've managed to work a better solution around that where we don't need to spend that money on a temporary container. That adjustment was made in last year's quarterly budget report, and so there's no need for that spend. So it's not a project that's actually contemplated at the moment.
Thank you, Mr. Mitchell. Thank you, Mr. General Manager. We have speakers, Councillor Ferguson, Councillor Patterson, and Councillor Sewell. Councillor Ferguson, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to just quickly apologise to fellow councillors. I was of the belief that we could talk about whole of topic once we're in community of the whole, not just my amendment there. So I just wanted to say sorry for that.
Yeah, okay, well, the procedure is we come out, we decide on the amendment, and then we can go back into committee of the whole on any other motion or amendment. Thank you. Councillor Patterson, please.
Yeah, thank you. Can you hear me there?
Yes, we can.
Yep.
Thank you.
All good. Thank you. We're just talking once again about this project and about this amendment, about council doing projects. Council has installed approximately 20 cabins in this actual caravan park that has gained income for the whole community. The community, our whole community also has things in their landscape and their visual things like pump stations, sewer breathers, power stations, telegraph poles, etc. And that's right next to their house. That's right in front of their doorway. That's so many things in our community where it's a visual thing because of council's need for utilities. Council's need to have these type of structures. Parts of the community. I'm saying out there that I support the whole community. Approximately 28,000 of us. I support the whole community. So, the other thing I'll just say about it is, the Kempsey Shire, to take money away from the rest of the community to change the visual aspect of a project, the visual aspect of a project is going to take money away from our parks community. It could be money that's there to deliver a play park for the kids. It could be a safety item in the car parking, things like that. So this is what council really needs to be aware of.
Thank you, Gallery.
We really need to be aware of that where council is spending money and making decisions. And I believe that Councillor White has put this into council as as a notice of motion without getting proper consultation through council and council.
Point of order, Mr. Mayor. Order. No, you don't have a point of order. I will say, Councillor Patterson, you're out of order.
That's all right. I'm used to it. Okay.
No, I'm sorry. I will finish speaking and then you may speak again, Councillor Patterson. What you have just said is basically you're saying that you are questioning the motives of another councillor and you do not have the right to do that. So I would like you to apologise to Councillor Wyatt right now, please.
I apologise, Councillor Wyatt, but this
Thank you, and you don't have to say any more. No, you don't say any more. That's all we need with an apology. Thank you, Councillor Patterson. Councillor Saul, your next speaker, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, what a morning. Mr. Mayor, I'd like to get back on track with your indulgence, please, and move that we come out of committee of the whole and deal with the amendment. So I'm moving that we come out of committee of the whole, Mr. Mayor. That's my first point.
Yes, and well, that's a procedural motion. And do we have a seconder? Councillor Bain, thank you. I didn't see you, Councillor Ring. Sorry. Yeah, I haven't moved it yet. Okay. I'd like to get my records. Right, the motion is we come out of the committee of the whole. Is there any dissent? There is 1%. Thank you. I declare carried. We're now out of the committee of the whole. We're opening up the usual debate on the motion that's amendment that's before us. And when there's no one else speaking, the mover of the original motion may speak in reply to the amendment. Councillor Saul, you wish to speak on the amendment?
Yes, sir. Yes, Mr. Mayor, I wish to make comment, if I may, for your indulgence. Mr. Mayor, speaking to the amendment, right now we have an issue where some members of the CRESCENT community are not happy about where the maintenance shed has been constructed. And the fact is there's already has been built. So there's quite an emotional and financial consideration for councillors to decide. The GM has already stated that communication should or may have been better. However, the reality is the cost of first to build the shed, then take it down and shift it to an equally suitable area, if possible, and rebuild it again. This again is a cost to council and the community. In terms of short-term impact with landscaping, completion of the pathway and a myriad of street artists, ideally, to decorate the shed, it may well be another icon for Crescent Head. Mr. Mayor, I think the amendment speaks for itself. I think it will be a win for the community and also for council, and I would urge my council to support it. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Saul. I'll now speak, and I will be speaking in opposition to the amendment. I understand Councillor Ferguson's objective here and trying to reduce the cost, but I think the original motion is a much more answerable one for the community. On our behalf, we have to make a decision of that community, and it's not just the Crescent Head community, it's the community across the Shire. We had the precedent recently of an error, and council staff are people too. We make mistakes. All of us make mistakes. I own up to lots of mistakes in running a meeting, but council staff make mistakes too, and sometimes those mistakes cost us money. At our previous meeting, we had a legal issue where a council staff member made a mistake. It was not intentional, and it cost council something in the order of $125,000. So we make mistakes. In this regard, I don't think this mistake of putting the shed up without consultation, without a review of environmental factors being done before the shed was started, without consulting the community, all those things should have been done, and that was a mistake, and it was not intentional. But we have the shed built, and I think the only way to rectify it and get the community on board is not to half reduce it, which is Councillor Ferguson's amendment. I really think we should have an answer going back to the original motion and putting that into operation. So that's my views, but I'm looking forward to the final decision of this matter. And we're running short of time. So, Councillor White, would you like to close debate on the amendment, please? Councillor Bain, have you spoken already on this?
I don't believe so. I believe we went into committee of the whole straight away, so I believe I can speak.
You did, okay. So, Councillor Bain, you could speak. Thank you.
I'm going to speak against the amendment, and again, I thank Councillor Ferguson for an attempt, to find a middle ground. However, I think on balance, we must rebuild our trust with community, and again, thank you, Councillor White. You've inspired me to maybe have another look at the operational plan and see if there's something in there that we can, if we can find, and that's a learning for me as a councillor, that that's something that I need to get my head around. And if it costs us money and it hurts, and it does, and it will, but that will underline that importance of, hang on, we've got to address this so this does not arise in future, and we may need to have a look at what are the procedures so that we learn from the mistake and we ensure that these same mistakes don't happen again. But I don't think we can do it at the cost of community trust. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Patterson, you wish to speak on the amendment before us. We're now back in open council, so you have a final point of view to give us. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I'd just like to speak to the amendment. While I don't agree to spend more money on this project than was required, but I agree to the fact that this project will be delivered in the appropriate place that has been chosen, that is workable, that is usable. The council has agreed to put that the path could go on the roadside. I do believe wholeheartedly, as well as I trust in council staff, that the delivery of this project, when finished, when landscaped, when complete, will be another fantastic project completed by our council with at least the least amount of expense to our ratepayers, who we must be very frugal, must be very careful where we're spending the money as we're moving towards a budget that continues to be in the red, and the project's projection for the next 10 years is $10 million every year. So we must be doing something about that. So I support this amendment by Councillor Ferguson, and I think it is a great acknowledgement to the fact that council will note the concerns of that part of the community and acknowledge that the improvements in the process, and to reduce the height of the shed, complete the landscape works and proposed area, and align the footpath with the road. So I totally agree with this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Patterson. Don't see any more hands up or lights on. I'll ask Councillor Wyatt in reply, please.
I just need to ask a procedural question as well. So when this amendment was put up, why was I not asked to whether I supported that amendment or not? I thought that was the procedural thing. Like my original amendment there, my original motion there, we then got this one straight up. I thought it was procedure that I had to accept or not that motion.
I apologise. I could have done that. It's not in the code of meeting practice that I do that, but it's normal procedure, so I apologise.
Things change.
Anyway, so I will speak against that. As I mentioned, when I put forward this before I got tricked into this,
excuse me.
Sorry, bad terms. Sorry.
There's no tricking going on here, Councillor.
Sorry. As I mentioned, I feel that council didn't read the room, and we didn't anticipate that community who have already demonstrated their antagonism towards various issues, such as the Plummer Road, Baker Drive, the Foreshore Plan, which has been ongoing for a long time, would not be triggered by the placement of the shed. We just didn't read the room right. Based on feedback from the community, which is diverse, and from people who have been warring over Crescent Head issues, they are now on the same side. Who'd have thought? Finally, it does not sit well in the landscape. I really take exception to the fact that I dreamt this up. We are 9 people around this table with a diverse set of experience and skills and professions. And this is one that I really do understand, having spent 30 years doing this. I would dare not question anybody else's professional integrity, but I get my question all the time. I take exception to that. I echo Councillor Bain that there is planning, consultation and process issues associated with the maintenance of this maintenance shed being built adjacent to the road and in front of the club. The planning process did have flaws and it didn't address the impacts. I also echo Councillor Riddington's comments about council's integrity and social values associated with our decisions. A private business, the main driver is economics and commerce and customer and probably customer satisfaction or service too. A public organisation as apprised to a private company, we need to consider the social impact values of our decisions. I acknowledge that there is finance involved in this. I do take exception that I'm being irresponsible by suggesting that we spend some money. But it's more than just the money in this situation. It is council's integrity and it is what the community wants, and I feel it needs to be removed.
Thank you, Councillor Wyatt. Your closed debate. We'll now vote on the amendment as put forward by Councillor Ferguson. It's on the screen. Is there any dissent against the amendment? The 4 dissenters are Councillor Riddington, Councillor Wyatt, Councillor Bain and myself. I declare the amendment carried and it now becomes the motion. We now can put the motion unless there's further debate on the motion that's now before us. Councillor Wyatt, you have a right to speak to the motion that's now before us. Yes.
I just echo exactly what I said before. Yeah, I don't have anything other to say. I think I've said everything, and I just reiterate what I said previously. It's not just about the economics here. It's about council's integrity. It's about council's integrity in moving forward. We've got some other really nasty decisions, not nasty, hard decisions to make. That's all I have. We've said it all.
Thank you very much, Councillor Wyatt. I'll now put the motion that's now before us, which is what is on the screen. Is there a dissent? There are 3 dissenters. I declare it carried, and it is now the resolution of council.
No kidding.
Probably adjourn now.
That was really bad. Can't kill anyone said.
Okay, we will now adjourn the meeting because we have the presentation by the East Kempsey Public School students.
Until 10:50.
Yes, 10:50 we will be coming back. Thank you. Councillor Ring, you could turn off your video if you like until we come back at 10:55. Thank you.
Oh, do you mind? It might be part of the school kids thing too.
I'll tell her.
Yeah. All right.
I'll just let her know if that's okay.
I'll watch, but I'll just have my camera off.
Councillors, can we just ask that you return to your seats for a moment, please? We're about to bring the school children in. Councillors, please come to your seats now. We've got the children waiting. Russell. Okay, Dean and Scott, can you please take your seats? Anthony's going to try and dial back in on his iPad. Okay, councillors, please just take your seats. And we would like to welcome the East Kempsey Primary School. So please come on in.
Okay, well, very quickly, Murrumbu for that, and I'll let you continue on in a moment. I'd like to welcome you to the chambers of Kempsey Shire Council, and it's really pleasing to see Principal Chow here, and also students from East Kempsey Public School. I'm an old school, East Kempsey, not Kempsey East. Sorry about that. But yes, so please continue with your presentation. We're looking forward to your presentation. Thank you.
With an A in our sound system. What sound is an A made, guys? So that's why it's an A, so it's done. But okay, so you will see now that a lot of language is out used. We serve the correct way. The kids all know the sound system now, and they think know all the things. So hopefully, in about 5 years, everybody knows the whole language now. So that's really good. So that's what it does. It's still the same way. I'm going to put the A's are up sound. That's still the same. It's just that A is now up. And then U sound, what that sounds like, what does an up sound? What sounds like that, guys? So when you say PUN, so it'll be normal. Okay, so that's the difference between the A and the U. So they're going to come around one by one, teaching you each of these words. Then hopefully you can have a go at it and then just put it together and ask a couple of things. Okay, do it all. Okay? I'll get them all to introduce themselves. Yeah, I don't think you like salad. Yeah, I don't think you like cold. Yeah, I don't think you like salad. Yeah, I don't think you like bail. It's my turn to avoid that. Next one, so I'll just for William's language. Everyone's hands up who wants to come and do it. And he said, yep, me. Okay, so we're going to start off with Brian. Brian's going to go to the first person, tell them what this is and what is English. And it's not that good stuff. We'll come one by one and move on to any people go around. Hey, what's him? Okay, Miss Jeffrey. Okay. Welcome. Why can't I hold that tomorrow? Marshall. Okay, Marshall. I better explain this for you. Our name is, because you're all saying Marshall. In the Dungan, which is only Smith to Dungan Nation and 3 Aboriginal nations right across Australia, when you see a double R with a vowel either side, it changes to that sound. So it's Marshall. Okay, what does it mean?
Welcome.
The girl in the
Welcome. Yeah, why? Yeah, why? Mean hello.
Thank you. Yeah, why? Yeah, why?
In busy Dixon. This is Kempsey. And that's you,
Yahweh.
Ngati Baji Dixon.
Yahweh.
Dixon.
Gimbisi.
Dixon.
That's a word for Kempsey, is it? Different. Oh, okay, this is okay. Gimbisi. Ditton. Thank you. This is Kempsey.
What?
I didn't know that they put the subject first.
Ngati Baji Dixon.
Tangati Baji Dixon. Tangati Baji Dixon. It is Tangati Lane.
Ngati Baji Dixon.
Guppy, knowing Ditton. Did I get that?
language, we always go subject first, object, then the vowel or a locative goes on the end of a noun or any kind of tag. Like we have lots of different tags. We don't have a lot of words. Okay, so that's how it is. So if I went, this is Dungary country, what's the subject?
56. Now we're on to the second part.
Welcome back, everyone. We're on to our next part of our council meeting for July 2023. We have just experienced a wide-ranging experience of the Dunghutti language, courtesy of Kempsey East Public School. And so I put on notice or put out there that we are very thankful for what they did for us. We're coming up to the second part of the notice of motion put up by Councillor White, and I'm going to hand over to her after I notify everyone that Councillor Patterson, due to technical difficulties, won't be attending the second part of this. Has an apology for the remainder of the meeting. Councillor White, we're coming to you, please.
Thank you. First up, I'd just like to make an amendment around the order of the wording in the first part of that. So the wording as it stands at the moment says undertake an expressions of interest process to recruit and establish a Crescent Head focus group. I just want to change the order of that wording to establish the Crescent Head focus group and recruit members via an EOI process with selection and approval to come to council for endorsement. I do. Yeah. Is that right?
Yes, thank you. And that'll be put up as soon as we can do that. But thank you very much, Councillor White.
And now I'd like to speak.
Would you like to formally move that?
Yes, I move that. Okay, just one sec. I'll send it to you.
And I'll need a seconder for this. Councillor Riddington.
I just sent.
White, you happy with that now?
Yeah, I just sent the words to Mr. Thorogood.
So that's up there now. Yes, we'll
minus the typo. Sorry.
Hand up all those people who have never had a typo. And one member of the public gallery. Congratulations, Graham.
What was that? He didn't have a typo.
Thank you. Councillor White, when you're ready, you can speak to the motion, please.
It's not there yet, but do you want me to keep going? I'll get going. Okay. I want to read two comments from some emails in relation to this. One says, I have been involved in many community and council groups, always supporting the efforts of council in their sometimes difficult decisions. Unfortunately, this last decision leaves me totally confused and defenceless with council's actions. And just bear in mind that this notice of motion was in relation to the holiday park. And the second email that I wanted to read says that it seems that council is out of step with what most locals feel is appropriate development, and it does not comply with council's own character statement. I'm aware that council does not.
Order, Councillor White. You've got to be speaking to the second part.
I am.
You seem to be talking about the first part. Sorry.
No, I didn't say. I said that bear in mind that this is in relation to, like, these emails are in relation to the shed. Okay, all right, forget it.
Thank you.
I'll start again.
Yeah, we need
Let me start again.
Yeah, we need to work on this second one, please. Okay. It's very important that we get it through.
Okay, I'll start again. So I want to read two emails that I received that we all received recently. First one, I have been involved in many community and council groups, always supporting the efforts of council in their sometimes difficult decision. Unfortunately, this last decision, i.e. the maintenance shed, leaves me totally confused and defenceless with council's actions. The second email is, it seems that council is out of step with what most locals feel is appropriate development and does not comply with council's own character statement. I'm aware council does not have to lodge a DA for developments such as this, but the lack of consideration shown towards community has left a very large hole in what little trust there is in the community towards council. I feel that there is a relationship between the community at Crescent Head and the council is damaged, fractured, and maybe even broken. Council has some significant decisions to make around the foreshore that have been quite contentious. We need to position council and the community to be in the best possible headspace to make considered and informed contributions and decisions. I feel that all parties are functioning in this state of hypervigilance, which is feeling it's the stress, we're feeling agitated and defensive. This affects people's abilities to actively listen, to work through reason, and to communicate effectively. It makes us easily upset and agitated and defensive and a bit irrational, and we can see that in people's body language and words. The shared Baker Street foreshore and the master plan are all contentious issues that have affected people's well-being and mental health, and they all represent changes that upset the apple cart. When corporations undergo restructures, they'll often prepare a change management plan, and that helps people deal with change because people react to change differently. Some love it and embrace the opportunities that it brings. Others are a bit more fearful of it. They fear what being lost. It won't be the same anymore, and we don't want things to change. Some people have been dealing with change at Crescent Head for a long time. During my time on council, all the emails and the conversations and the social media, you can hear angst and stress and the social impact that this has had. And I think the community is very fractured, actually. It's not a united community, that's for sure. Yeah, we can underplay the mental health impacts of public decision-making if we want, and satirists can mock it if they feel the need. I mean, sadly, mental health does have that stigma attached still. I mean, in my profession, I've delivered some very unsavoury public policy. I've been involved in situations that have resulted in horrendous violence. You don't know what triggers people. I feel that council needs to go back to stage 1 community engagement, stakeholder consultation, whatever you want to label it. I call it community relations 101. We need to rebuild rapport and trust and demonstrate authenticity. It's exactly like trying to prepare a broken relationship, a part where one partner feels betrayed by another. And in this situation, the other partner is a public organisation, and we need to take the lead and repair this relationship. I'd like to see focus group do that. And I note that the GM's comments about inform, consult, involve and collaborate, there's a question they're having but I'm a bit confused by the comment there. You know, it needs to be considered in the context of legislation and other processes. So I'm confused because this is straight out of council's playbook, the IRP2 public relations spectrum that we often hear. It's designed to assist community to select in the selection and level of participation. You know, we have the inform and the listen part. We provide information. The second part is we consult and we contribute. So we get feedback via the Your Say Macleay. We involve and we people with so they can participate, such as the community catch-ups. The collaboration bit, which is what I'm after here, is where we can work together. We can understand. We can develop alternatives and solutions, and we build that trust and relationship back up. That's the collaborating part. We partner with community to make decisions for us, about us, with us. This is in every briefing that we get in engaging with community. So yeah, I'm a bit confused. The second comment from the GM about the community advisory group. Yeah, I understand that there is a proposal to establish that group as part of the foreshore plan. Oh, bugger. Oh.
That's your time.
But is that including the mistake bit?
Yes.
Okay. Yes.
No, he gave you the full 5 minutes.
Okay. All right. I'll wrap that up to the end. That's good.
Thank you. Do we have any speakers, please, on this council? Councillor Ripping, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate it. And I agree with Councillor White 100%. A community group of this nature, I think, would be really beneficial. There are precedents for this. I know I'm part of the Australia Day Committee, and that's called for public and contributions, and we go through a selection process. I think that this is a really, really good initiative to try and mend a very fractious relationship with the community. I support it 100%, and I'd really, really like the backing of my fellow councillors to support Councillor White's motion.
Thank you, Councillor Ferguson.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd also like to speak in support of it, but I'd also like to just acknowledge the groups like Stewart's Point, Crescent Head, and Voices of Southwest Rocks that do an amazing job, and not take away from them. I've had quite a few dealings and emails and that with them, and they've all been, and even since the recent goings on, they were all very polite, very well spoken, and speak clearly. So we can't, in forming a group, miss out on making sure we stay in touch with those guys as well. So thank you, but yeah, in support.
Thank you very much. Councillor Saul, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, I have a question, please. Mr. Mayor, a question to the General Manager, please, on the item A.
Yes.
Just for clarification, if I may, please. The question is, now it says here, to collaborate on planning and development matters in Crescent Head. Does that actually, would that interfere with the planning process at all? Would that detract from the planning process? Because obviously if a person puts a DA in to council, would that be have to be referred to some group as a suggestion?
Mr. General Manager.
Yeah, through Mr. Mayor, it's what I've tried to highlight in the comments here, that if this group's established, its involvement in a situation like you've described there would have to follow the requirements as set out by the Environmental Planning Assessment Act. So there'd be a group that could actually have that consultation there, similar to the resident and ratepayers groups. The DA would be there, it would be on exhibition. That group could actually make a comment in that sort of a way. So they can actually do that, but they'd need to follow that process.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Saul. Oh, good to see you there. Councillor Bain, please.
Morning, Mr. Mayor. I would like to speak in favour of this motion, and also take into consideration that there is already a process for a community advisory group regarding the foreshore, but the foreshore is only a part of the picture. And I'd like to pick up on what Councillor Ferguson said too, that other communities have their own organisations. So, like SPADCO and Voices that are a strong voice for community. So, I'm wondering, possibly, is it a council role to set up such a group, or if the community does that themselves, we then make sure that we consider them stakeholders, as we do with Voices and SPADCO. On the other hand, and regarding the community engagement process, I did some professional development on this, so I've got a bit of got my head around it a bit. Is the more time that is involved in engagement, the more power the group has. So, when it takes you 5 minutes to fill in a survey, it doesn't carry as much weight if you've spent 6 months looking at a project as a focused group, as the original foreshore group spent a lot of time and a lot of energy, and then and had power in making a decision, but then that decision was rescinded because of concerns from other members of the community. So we've got to be very, very careful that when we form a group, that it is representative, and that's the trick. Getting a representative group of committed people that are willing to spend time and energy on making recommendations, and they can only make recommendations. They can't tell, they're not elected, they're not legislative, so they can only make recommendations to us. But if it's managed and has a clear, I would say, like in my terminology, I would say C would be a clear terms of reference, then that would then I could support this.
Thank you, Councillor Bain. Any further debate? If there's no further debate, I'll ask.
Mr. Mayor, can I just clarify something?
Sure.
Yep.
Question.
Yeah, just for point of clarification, so I make sure I've got the understandings right. If this is resolved, what we would look at doing is September, October, getting a report back to council which actually set out the scope and the purpose and everything and the criteria, and then council could endorse that, and then we'd go through that process. Yep, okay, that's fine.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor White. Oh, Councillor Saul, you wish to speak now?
No, another question, if I may.
You can ask a question, yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Bain raised the issue of ensuring that they only can make recommendations. Is that exactly what this motion in front of us will be saying and doing? Not on the assumption what they're pushing for will actually be adopted by council.
I don't see them, Councillor Saul, of having any other power than a focus group making submissions, basically. A bit like the councillor social housing group that this is being set up with. We can make suggestions to the other councils, but it's not have no power other than making a suggestion. Would that be right?
Yeah, I just want that clarified. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor White, would you like to close debate?
Yes, please. So the intent is next level community consultation. It's collaborate. And I define that in the IAP2 document, inform, consult, involve, collaborate, empower. So collaborate. We will work together with you in each aspect of decision making, including the development of alternatives and the identification of the preferred solution. The role of the community is to partner. We work together with the community to develop an understanding of all issues and interests and work out alternatives and identify preferred solutions. That's the intent. As I've sort of said before, I know that there is the community action group, but that will be managed by consultants specifically to identify and analyse issues associated with that car park only. This community is fractured. It's very clear to those, it's very clear that it's fractured. Council needs to nurture a relationship to rebuild the trust. Council needs to be authentically engaging in this community out there. It's next level. My thought process for this group is that it would be made up of 9 to 11 people from Maguire's crossing into Dalton Guy to Big Hill, from diverse sections of the community that have connections to the community through an EIO process with a very specific terms of reference how they would operate. This is demonstrating our authenticity in community engagement. And when we have contentious issues, you do need to take next level community consultation. It takes more than just a survey and your say McClay. And I sincerely hope that you support this.
Thank you, Councillor White. The motion is before you on the screen. Is there any dissent? 2, Councillor Saul and Councillor Butterfield. Thank you. I declare it carried. Now, we come to 11.2. It's notice of motion on voice education, been put forward by Councillor Bain. And the recommendation is now on the screen. Councillor Bain, would you like to move that?
I would like to move the motion that is on the screen.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Riddington. Oh, sorry. Councillor Ring, did you put your hand up? Yeah, Councillor Ring, you're seconding it. Thank you. Sorry, Councillor Riddington, you. Okay. Councillor Bain, would you like to speak to it, please?
Morning, Mr. Mayor. Yes, the whole voice referendum issue has been a large one for me, as I have a close relationship with the First Nations community on Dungari country, and I've been making a point the last 6 months to listen to what First Nations people have to say, and there seems to be there's a lot of confusion, and there's a lot of fear, and there's a lot of doubt, because I believe there has been a campaign of misinformation from certain groups and to undermine the integrity of the referendum, really, and the integrity of the democratic process. So I believe that with our Australian Local Government Association has 4 First Nation representatives on the Referendum Engagement Committee. So they're mayors, First Nations mayors and deputy mayors around the country. One including Councillor Esme Livermore, who is the Deputy Mayor of Queanbeyan and Palorang, and she also identifies as having Thungari heritage coming from up on the tablelands, so I believe that we need to be pushing out accurate information to combat the misinformation that's floating around. In terms of what Councillor Patterson has spoken about in the past, of the importance of educating our community about their political rights. So that's what just understanding what a referendum is, what a constitutional amendment is, what's the point of the Constitution. Let's encourage all those young people, particularly young First Nations people, to be enrolling to vote. Providing links to resources. We don't need to we don't need to make our own resources that we know cost the council. It's just providing access to information that already exists. And when I wrote this notice of motion, I did
consult with some First Nations people and read it to them, and they gave me a few hints. And that's where this E comes from, allowing community groups to access council facilities to promote culturally safe and respectful dialogue. So that is, for example, a colleague and I have started running some voices workshops because people were confused, and they're not promoting or they're not saying yes or no, they're just saying what's going, this is the information. And that's been quite fruitful in generating discussion, both for and against. And at one point, we did use the council library meeting room, so facilities like that could be available. And I'm happy to discuss cultural safety if anyone wants to needs clarity on that. I mean, if we don't have clarity on that, that's one of the reasons we need to do some cultural training. But I would encourage that this is not saying that we want to promote the voice. It's not saying we're against the voice. It's just let's get accurate information out there, and so that people can make an informed decision when they come to vote on the referendum, whatever date that happens to be. Marangu, and I commend this motion to my councillor colleagues. Thank you.
Councillor Riddington, please.
Thank you, and thank you, Councillor Bain, for this really meaningful notice of motion. And thank you also for putting together your community workshops. I thought they were really beneficial, and one I attended was great. I was at a function on the weekend where the majority of people had no idea whether to vote yes, whether to vote no, what it all means. So I think if we can have accurate information, that would be fantastic, and have access and availability of that information. I think that's fantastic. Coming in on the radio this morning, the government are putting out pamphlets for yes and no, remember? So I think if we can have access to both cases, open and honest communication, I think this is a really good motion. So thanks, and I hope people support it.
Thank you, Councillor Riddington. I'll speak in favour of the motion before us. I was privileged to be at the Australian Local Government Association conference in Canberra last month, and the Deputy Mayor of Queanbeyan Pelarong Council spoke there about the voice, and she told me that people are misinformed in all parts of the world. Her own son came back, and he's a young Aboriginal lad. He came and said, "Mum, we're going to get all the beaches back." And of course, that's not what the voice is about. And she was saying we need proper information out there. That's her purpose of speaking at the conference. So, yeah, this motion will help our own Kempsey Shire community to be more informed so that they can make an informed choice when the referendum arrives. Councillor Saul.
Sorry, I was looking online and then, Mr. Speaker.
Councillor Saul, you have some things to say.
A question in regard to the proposed motion. Now, is it correct that the yes and no case is being sent out to every resident in their mailboxes or through the post or?
Yes, that was, as Councillor Riddington just announced, that they're about to send it out. They've actually put the unedited scripts of both sides out on the internet today, but they will be then put into a booklet, and every person in Australia will receive that booklet with both the no and the yes cases, Councillor Saul.
And part two then, and now of course that will naturally be available in our library and plus other council offices, I take, for the public to pick up and read and peruse.
Well, if they're being mailed out to everyone, everyone should have one, Councillor Saul, but I presume we might have some extra copies here, I don't know.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, that's what I'm asking, just to clarify. I thought that was happening with the mail out, and that should come to all Australians.
Yes.
Thank you.
Any further debate or questions? Councillor White, no.
One other point. I mean, I support this as well. I listened to Senate's debate recently, and also sort of various media outlets, and social media algorithms are sending us information based on our age demographic. So those of us that are over 40, we're only getting no campaign material based on the algorithm, and under 40 are getting yes material based on an algorithm. So I think we need to have a much more balanced understanding, as Councillor Bain has suggested, and maybe try and switch our algorithms. They're stereotyping us.
Thank you, Councillor Wyatt. Councillor Bain, would you like to close debate, please?
Simon.
Oh, wait on, didn't see another light. Councillor Butterfield, I'm sorry.
Hey, all right. Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Just after hearing that we're actually going to get all this stuff mailed out and the information we received through the internet, TV, radio, I'm not sure we need this motion. We're already being made aware of the yes and no votes. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Butterfield. No further debate. Councillor Bain to close for a second time. But this time, get a go.
Martin Wu, I hear what Councillor Butterfield has said, but and Councillor Saul, that all of that information will be mailed out. There are 2,000 word essays, right? Now, many people in this digital age look at a 2,000 word essay and go, I want the 4 main points, right? They're not going to read it. It'll end up lighting the fire or going as mulch on the garden or end up as rubbish in the street. We need to have respectful dialogue around it, and that means we need accurate information. And a lot of that information that's available on the internet or is getting sent to us through our Facebook algorithms is not accurate. I mean, I've heard the reference to it will only be a representation by elite Indigenous people, and it's like, it concerns me that people go, well, actually, if you've got a university education, you've got a PhD, and you've been politically active for 20 years, it makes you elite and out of touch with community. So what do we call grassroots Indigenous people? Is there an assumption, other assumptions around that? I think we need to put things like that out. That there's a concern amongst First Nations people that by being included in the Constitution, which some see as an illegal document because the land was never ceded, its land has been stolen, so they see the Constitution as an illegal document, and if they're recognised within that they will lose sovereignty. There is absolutely no question that there is no reality to the argument that First Nations people will cede sovereignty by being included in the Constitution. There's the argument that there's not enough detail. Constitution is a document in principle. So, for example, the document, the Constitution says the Commonwealth shall be responsible for the defence of Australia. It doesn't say we have to have 700 muskets and 800 barrels of powder in Hyde Park at all times, which is what would be done, the detail, if it was written when the Constitution was written. So there's all of this misinformation. Let's get clarity. Let's get accurate information. And there are valid arguments for the voice and there are valid arguments against the voice. Let's hear them. Let's think about them. And let's be proactive in promoting this information. Thank you, colleagues.
Thank you, Councillor Bain. I will now put the motion that's on your screen. Is there any dissent? Councillor Saul, I'm not sure. Councillor Wyatt, is your hand up? No. And Councillor Butterfield. So that's 2 dissenting. Thank you very much. I declare the motion carried, and we go back to the beginning of the agenda to item 10.1. It's report to Council on South West Rock Structure Plan. The recommendation there is that the Council adopt the South West Rock Structure Plan. Councillors, anyone wishing to move it?
Or move an alternate. You can move an alternate.
You can move something different.
Yeah, I'd like to do an amendment. Is it an amendment?
Let's be clear, Councillor Riddingham. If you wish to move it, whatever you move is the motion before us, and you don't have to have that amendment added because it's your motion. Do you wish to move the motion?
Do I? Yes, I do.
Thank you.
Then I want to change it.
Well, no, you're confused. So would you just bring forward what your motion is, please?
I think.
Yes, please. Please say it.
Keep your pants on. So my thinking is there's a section of this structure plan that I would like to change, and I would like to change the Gordon Young Drive zoning from C4 to C2.
Is that on the screen now, Councillor?
Yes.
With a
What
40
and what?
hectare minimum lot size at the end of it. Yes, that what you're moving?
That's it.
Right, so it's moved by you. Do we have a seconder for that? Councillor Bain. Councillor Bridington, would you like to
Thank you.
talk to your...
Sorry about that before I do get a little hairy. Okay, so I'd like to talk to this motion, and I'd firstly like to thank the staff and the management of council for putting this together with our community consultation, with our community catch-ups, also with the excellent research from the Voices of Southwest Rocks and across the community. I really appreciate the input we've had into this structure plan. The structure plan is a framework. It is a framework that goes towards having another look at the Land and Environment Plan, the Kempsey Land and Environment Plan. So in it, it's been great to have the height limits identified, because there were some pockets of Southwest Rocks that didn't have height limits as zoned. So I'm really pleased to see that, and it's all been clarified. When we come to Gordon Young Drive, and that, have we got a picture of that for the people? Dan, please.
Mr. Thorogood?
Oh, sorry, Mr. Manager Thorogood. Aren't we having a great day today?
I'm having a pretty bad one, but
Oh,
thank you.
yeah. Okay, so if we've got this picture. So when it comes to Gordon Young Drive, it's a large piece of land that in the structure plan as it stands put up to council is zone C4. Now C4, even though it can have environmental housing, it also has a range of other uses within that zoning, which I really believe is not appropriate for that land. Now, from my point of view, C2 is one step down from C1, which is a national park, and council cannot designate a national park. That has to be a state government national parks designation. C2 is the next step down, which says that it's a high conservation level site with species, flora and fauna that needs to be conserved. With C4, you could have, this is hypothetically, you could have a developer come in and put a development application into council for environmental living houses and spread out whatever. You could have that. But our community, I believe, wants that site preserved. You could also use it for other uses. If you go online and have a look, you can have a look at boat ramps and a whole range of other uses that's in C4. It won't be applicable in this site. However, it's broad. C2 encompasses a high conservation level, but also I'd like to talk about the talk always in town of the need for a high school. We do need a high school. Unfortunately, we do not have the population that really could warrant a high school at this particular point in time. I know that we have received, council staff have received a letter from the Department of Education, state government, saying that they would like it retained as C4 because they might in the future like to have a high school on Gordon Young Drive on this particular piece of land. However, if we zone it C2, it does not prohibit the Education Department asking for a rezoning and following the correct planning processes in the future. What I'm asking for is preservation of this site as entire C2, high conservation, not C4. If the Education Department wishes to build a high school in the future, and it could be 10 to 20 years, who knows, I would like to have the preservation of this site in place now, and they can apply for a rezoning when and if they wish to build a high school. That is all I would like to add as an amendment to this particular motion. I really thank the council for this structure plan because it's an important, absolutely critical piece of framework towards our CLEP, and it will go a long way to making it very clear what our community in Southwest Rocks wants. And I commend it to my fellow councillors.
Thank you, Councillor Whittington. Councillor Saul.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, a question, if I may, again, please.
Yes.
Question to the Director. Is this land we're speaking of at Gordon Young Drive in the actual motion, is that potentially a land claim, are you aware of, or is Council aware of?
Councillor, Mr. Jackson, please.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, we do believe it is subject of a land claim. Yes. Undetermined land claim.
The second part then of that question, if this plan is adopted, would that affect the Aboriginal community utilising that land for any reason, or perhaps selling it off themselves?
Mr. Jackson.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, the land would need to be subject to a planning proposal to change the zoning, or whatever development was proposed would need to be consistent with the C2 zoning if that was applied. Yeah.
Thank you. Can I clarify, please? That's the main question. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Saul. Any further speakers?
Yeah.
Councillor Wyatt, please.
Yeah, 100% support the rezoning of that land. I mean, that's why we're here debating this again, because this was brought up last time. South West Rocks has been identified as taking 50% of new housing and growth in our shire, which is in the North Coast Plan. You know, those menacing zombie DAs are sort of hitting us with a double whammy, because that's what's been used by the state to determine that we're going to get that 50% of land. Good planning needs to be about capacity and suitability of the land, not growth targets. It also needs to look at limits of acceptable change. How much are we willing to accept that change? We need to look at the precautionary principle here, which is a fundamental component of ecological sustainable development, so that any threat of irreversible damage and lack of full scientific certainty is not a reason is a reason to go with the precautionary principle. Gordon Young Drive is 30 hectares-ish. It does have a patch of threatened ecological community there, Schedule 2 of the Biodiversity Conservation Act. Let's talk about environmental living. The purpose of environmental living, which is C4, is to provide residential options in rural areas and is generally applied on residential bush blocks. It's residential use or development. It's to provide privacy and seclusion for residents in that zone. It's to provide for limited community, tourism and recreational uses and passive recreation options. You can have a biosolid fuel treatment, camping grounds, dual occupancies, extensive agriculture, group homes, sewage treatment and water supply. So I see some really good gaslighting opportunities for future developers, such as I want to propose dual occupancy homes with a couple of native trees, a few nest boxes and a bush regeneration group. There's my ticket for environmental living. Forgive my cynicism. No, not. Department of Education. So, you know, they sort of see that C4 is fit for purpose and they want to retain their option to have that school there. You know, this has been talking about a school there for decades. Based on community's own data, 42% of the population, we're going to be over the age of 45 in 20 years. So not many school age groups there. They've said themselves, Department of Education, that it's a numbers game, that numbers criteria to date haven't met the target for a state school, but private school could be an option. And regardless of what the zoning is, a merit selection process needs to be undertaken under the Environmental Planning and Assessment Act. It is high conservation value. It is identified koala habitat. It most probably is a coastal wetland environmental area or coastal vulnerability. It does have 2 threatened ecological communities. If Department of Education want to build a school, they can do a planning proposal. I mean, and let's face it, it's not like we haven't seen the state push back onto communities before and do what they want on that land, so they can do that. So I propose that we support Councillor Riddington. We go with this precautionary principle, we make it a C4, and we stop any C2, sorry, and we stop any developer from finding a loophole development opportunity. Let's give it the protection that it intrinsically deserves and make it a C2, please.
Thank you, Councillor Wyatt. Councillor Ferguson, please.
Yeah, just a question, if I may, Mr. Mayor, and possibly through the General Manager. When changing land zones and obviously values, especially with private land, there's obviously can be massive repercussions of that is there any alarm bells ringing out with this one? Is there anything we should be worried about as far as repercussions from landowner?
Mr. Jackson.
Mr. Jackson, thank you.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. There is still the process of actually getting this through the LEP review that'll be done over the next couple of years. So the Crown and the Planning Department could challenge this zoning, in which case, we'd have to address that along the way. So there is a risk in that respect.
Thank you, Mr. Jackson. No further questions. Councillor Saul.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just realised by rereading the actual motion, we're adopting the structure plan along with this Gordon Young Drive. So my question again, I suppose, to Director Jackson, if I may, if this structure plan is then adopted, does that mean then a height restriction on the entire South West Rocks or still only parts of it? Just for clarification purposes, please.
Mr. Jackson.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. The majority of South West Rocks does have height restrictions. There are some zonings which don't involve height restrictions. However, they are very limited. They are stated clearly in the document. There's a table in the actual South West Rocks structure plan, but it's a very limited number of zones which don't have a height restriction on them.
And secondly, will they be actually then adjusted if this goes through, or will that still be the same case, please? I wasn't quite sure what you meant.
So the table will be adopted. There's a single line that refers to this particular site, which has the height limits on it for this particular site, and that will be adjusted in the document to reflect the C2 zoning if that's applicable.
No, pardon me, but the remainder of South West Rocks, again, it will have that 8.5 metre restriction. Is that correct?
There are two different heights. There's the 8.5 and also the 11.5. So sections of it will be at the 11.5 and the others at the 8.5. Yeah.
Thank you for clarification.
Thank you, Mr. Jackson. Thank you, Councillor Saul. Any further debate? If not, I'll ask Councillor Whittington to close debate.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for that really good conversation. Councillor White, with her wonderful environmental qualifications, says it really well, but I think we really need to protect our community. At the moment, we've got a lot of development going on. This is a high value conservation area. We really need to think it through and put the C2 zoning as a recommendation, really. It's a framework, as I said earlier, to the CLEP. And then if the state needs to consider it, so be it. But we've made our intentions very clear, and we can fight that battle if and when it comes. Also, it does not, and I must stress, it does not prohibit the Education Department putting in a planning application, going through the correct process to change the zoning if and when it feels the need to build a high school. Thank you, councillors.
Thank you, Councillor Whittington. I'll now put the motion. Is there any dissent? Councillor Saul, I declare it carried. Thank you. We now come to item 10.2 on the agenda, which is on page 18, Kempsey Street Sports Complex Master Plan Amendments. The recommendation is there. I withdrew this from the block of ones to be accepted as a group. So I will move that the council adopt the amended master plan as attached to this report. I'll need a seconder. Councillor Whittington, thank you. I will quickly speak to it. The master plans are created by council staff with direction from council, and master plans then get finalised after lots of community consultation, and that's how we have the Eden Street complex and hopefully the 2 pavilions being built there with that grant money that came because we had a brilliant master plan. The master plan for Kemp Street is also brilliant. It's got lots of different components to it. It even has a dog park in the plan. So there's some really good things on it, and it enhances the ability for quite a number of sports to use that. And again, it depends on grant funding. The committee of the Rangers came to me, and I had two meetings. I had a meeting with the committee, and then I had another meeting with the executive, and I put their issues to Director Jackson, and that resulted in a resolution coming out of a previous council meeting that was to examine changing the master plan. The master plan was changed because the master plan showed a turf wicket between the two soccer fields, or for the Rangers they call them football fields, and that turf wicket, after looking at the timetables for training, pre-season and different competitions in the soccer world, that turf wicket will only be available for about 2 months of the year. And with consultation with the Macleay Valley Cricket Association, they realised that only be able to use a turf wicket for 2 months of the year, and them having to maintain the turf wicket, it wasn't a sensible thing for them to support. So they supported the idea that the master plan would be amended. The master plan has been amended and has come before you today, and I would ask you to support this amendment to the master plan and keep our fingers crossed on further funding of it through grant applications into the future. Anyone else wish to speak? Councillor Bain.
Yes, I'd like to speak in support of this motion. I think it's really important that we have public facilities and public amenities that people can get out, keep fit. It saves money for it saves money and emotional pain on our community when people are fit and healthy, and it's just an absolutely great outcome. And well done, council, for the community engagement they did with the cricket players and the cricket association. The feedback I've been getting from people is that they felt listened to and they felt included, and yeah, well done.
Thank you, Councillor Bain. Any further speakers? If not, I'll put the motion. Is there any dissent? There is no dissent. I declare it carried. That's the end of all the business. 10.3 was withdrawn. Yes, sorry. Yeah. So we now move to 10.3, the final item on our agenda. Disposal of surplus council land, sewer land, East Street, South Kempsey, lot 22, deposited plan 553475. It's on page 20. Councillor Bain, you withdrew it. Do you like to move it?
No, I'd like to speak against it.
Okay. So do we have a mover? Councillor Ferguson is moving it. Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Ring. I've got a few people seeking the call there. Thank you for all those seeking the call. But Councillor Ring, I saw your hand. Thank you. Councillor Ferguson, would you like to speak to it, please?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, just looking at it, it is an area that we can't use. It is subject to flood. So if we can liquidate the asset and use the money for some of the projects we've got, I think it's probably a good thing. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ferguson. Councillor Riddington, please.
Could I please ask that we move into committee as a whole to talk about this one, please?
You certainly could move that. We need a seconder. Councillor White moves, seconds it. Right, any dissent from moving into the committee of the whole? One, thank you. You're voting against it, Councillor Ring. That we go into committee. Thank you. Right, it's carried that we go into committee of the whole. Thank you. Councillor Bain, please.
Madam Chair, Mr. Mayor, the reason that I withdrew this and I want to speak against it is because wetlands are important and they have more than commercial value. In fact, and commercial value could well be less than the projected value of moving a shed, for example. And yet the environmental value of a wetland is immense. Wetlands provide many environmental benefits. One of them is filtration of water systems. They provide habitat, and they also provide somewhere for water to go in a flood. So when you've got healthy wetlands, you've got less impact. So they play a flood mitigation role as well. The wetland that we're talking about is on Gills Bridge Creek. So the catchment for that begins up around Calatini, Burnt Bridge. The creek runs through the industrial area, and then comes into this filtration system, which is the wetland. So what I'd be interested in seeing, is the potential of maybe some community groups who are interested in water quality, doing some water testing upstream from the swamp and from the wetland, and downstream from the wetland, and between the industrial zone and the wetland, and see if there's any implications for water quality there. I also, when I look at the map, there are areas there that are not in flood-prone land, which could be amenable down the line to medium-density housing. I've spent a few days last week in Western Sydney in quite medium to high density housing areas, and I was very impressed with what the councils down there have done in creating parks, playgrounds, and preserving areas of nature, which are really, really important for the people living and increasing livability in those areas. So if we are going to look at population growth, which is the demographics tell us, possibly we want to move away from impacting coastal forests and coastal wetlands, and we could look at developing. There's also a new, I believe there's a development of a shopping centre in South Kempsey, new shopping centre in South Kempsey, that there's plans for improving, increasing the industrial area. So all of that needs housing. I just think for the potential commercial income from this, it might be better for us to hold off, have a look at what the environmental values might be, maybe do an assessment on that, and not make that move of disposing of council of a public asset. Thank you.
So, Councillor Bain, you have the potential with what you've just said to foreshadow a replacement motion if this is defeated. So, do you have a foreshadowed motion you'd want to put up? An amendment, I should say?
If it's defeated, nothing happens.
Huh?
I don't think I could put an amendment, because any amendment I made would be against the intent of the original motion. So I will just be voting against this.
Thank you.
And if
as the general manager just pointed out to me, Councillor Bain, if it gets voted down, the council doesn't put it on the market. So, yep. Councillor Riddington, do you want to speak?
Oh, thank you. Until last night, I hadn't even thought of that alternative scenario that Councillor Bain has just put to us. I would really like to see some work done on what other uses we could use for a wetland or medium density housing. I think that was really a good suggestion that I had never entered my head, and that's to my shame. So I would support Councillor Bain's idea, but again, we are in a financial crisis, and we need to think about the future and what we can do with that land. I take on board what Director Trotter was telling us yesterday, that it is like old land set aside for a sewage treatment plant. Doesn't mean it can't be used for something else in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Riddington. I'll ask the General Manager to clarify the motion and the potential of what would happen if we defeated it. Thank you, Councillor.
Yeah, through Mr. Mayor, we're actually just going to get the map put up as well, so you can actually have a look at that as we have that discussion. And I think I'll try and clarify some of the things that Councillor Bain said. Councillor Bain's talking about medium density housing around the site, not on this site at all. because you simply can't build on that site. So it is actually potentially around that. And you can see from here the highlighted area. The actual flooding area goes, if you're looking at the left of that, it pretty well goes halfway through the next block to the left, and also the next block to the right is the actual flooding area. It's mapped as environmental protection and coastal vulnerability. So it's heavily protected. So even if council were to sell it, here we go. Yeah, even if council were to sell it, whoever had ownership of it is still restricted totally by that zoning and those restrictions. So any sort of development they may wish to do with it is very, very limited on what they can actually do. It's not an area that we would be looking at developing into parkland or anything like that, because of the nature of it. It's just far too difficult to be developing into any sort of parkland areas. But whether you do sell it or don't sell it, whoever has it, if anyone wanted to do anything with it, it is quite heavily restricted.
Could I just please ask a follow-up?
Certainly, Councillor Reading.
So, if people want to buy it, what do you reckon they're going to do with it?
Councillor, Mr. General Manager.
Look, that would be to the discretion of the owner, and that's where I would say you put it out. It's got limited use, and you can't see a lot of uses with it. You've got a few different neighbours around that may find some use for part of it, but whatever the use they may find for it, they've got to overcome those environmental restrictions on it.
Thank you, Councillor Wyatt, and then Councillor Sewell.
So I just have the LEP map up, which has a block in there that's designated SP2, which is infrastructure, and then around it has RU2, which is rural residential, I think. What is it? Rural.
Just rural.
Yeah, rural landscape. Sorry. Yeah, rural landscape. Yep. You know, even though we've talked about those the values and also the difficulty in building there, it still doesn't stop someone from buying that land and putting a development proposal to infill a wetland and build something there, does it?
Mrs. Almanac.
True. Technically, no, but the ability to infill a wetland is, I think I'd go to Mr. Jackson on this, but it'd be very, very remote for you to be able to infill any sort of wetland or something that's got this coastal vulnerability mapping in it because of how it's already mapped. I couldn't envisage how that would actually occur.
I mean, do you think so? I mean, this is my coming from the point of view that I feel that environmental planning law is there to provide the license with mitigations to do whatever we want. I mean, do you think that is likely that, you know, when someone puts in a development application, the law says that you have to consider it on its merits? So again, using that precautionary principle, how can we make sure that those values are protected?
Mr. Mayor, I think that they are already strongly protected because it's actually in that coastal vulnerability. It's in our coastal hazard layer. It's got high environmental value. The core part of it is actually in the actual overland flow. When Rodas Creek actually floods and flows through there. So you simply could not build anything in that main overflow area. The section at the top left-hand corner of the actual block, I understand, is also an EEC, endangered ecological community. So there's constraint to that as well. So it is, like I said, it's a very, very heavily constrained site. So it's going to have very limited use. Okay, so just for Councillor Ring, that's the purple's coastal vulnerability, and the yellow or the pink underneath is high environmental value.
You meant Councillor White?
Yeah.
No, for Councillor Ring wouldn't have heard that because.
Okay, thank you.
And so, what about so you could put it on the biodiversity offset market though, so somebody could use that as a biodiversity offset. So they could buy that under biodiversity offset, put a conservation agreement over it of some sorts, just like they've done out at Keith Andrews, is it? I don't know. I'll take advice on that.
Look, that may be a possibility. It would depend on them doing a full ecological assessment and working out through that process, which is something we have not done with that site.
Councillor Saul and then Councillor Bain.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, I'm speaking in favour of the motion, if I may. Mr. Mayor, I think the staff report highlights the fact that upon disposal, council rates and charges will only be payable, and weed management and fence maintenance no longer be required. Well, that's quite a cost to council over time, having to maintain an area really that doesn't have any real benefit to council, more so than just idle land. Mr. Mayor, if we can sell this, being in a swamp area, we have an opportunity to, let's grab it with both hands and dispose of it. I'm sure the funding can be used for other projects that have far more merit. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Saul. And if you grab it with both hands, you'll have muddy hands. You'll have to wash them. Thank you. That was a joke. Sorry, Councillor White. Councillor Saul, Bain, please, and then Councillor White again.
Go to close debate. Oh, okay.
Councillor Bain.
Just that in terms of responding to idle land, like I think the limited use of it would probably, and my guess would be, and this is purely supposition, is it would be you could run cattle on it in dry times. Okay, so it'd become a paddock for cattle. Now, cattle, this is what I'm assuming would be about the only use of that land, and to run cattle in dry times, which does impact on the efficacy of a wetland in its functions as a filter and as a habitat. So again, precautionary principle. Could we, I know that there are community groups around, whether that be land care groups or Save Our Macleay River, that have water testing capacity, again, at no cost to council, so that, because I'm very aware, Councillor Saul, of the impact of the costs and our financial situation. But take a look at that. Take a look at the water quality. Take a look at the function, how that wetland is functioning. And I'm not talking about an expensive environmental assessment. I'm talking about a rule of thumb. And then if issues are found that can be followed up, then maybe that's more information. We need another discussion. But I would urge us to think carefully about taking away yet another environmental, and I didn't know that had environmentally endangered community in there. I'm glad I found that out, because that even more strong, it adds to the way I'm feeling that we need to put in more environmental protection for wetland areas like this. Thank you.
Councillor Ferguson.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor White just touched on this one, but I recently went to a workshop on carbon trading, and that's mostly for prime production, and it's getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And there is, I think someone mentioned yesterday that predominantly the soil type there is peat, which would be super high in carbon. So there is possibility, if we did keep it, to offset something like that with carbon trading and generated income to cover maintaining costs.
No, Councillor Ferguson, you've moved the original money.
Yeah, no, that's what I was...
You can vote against yourself, I guess. Thank you. Are there any further speakers? Councillor Riddington and Councillor White. We're still in committee of the whole.
I'm glad we went into that, actually. I wonder whose idea that was. Okay, so I'm thinking we need to have a bit more information about this and a bit more research go into it, especially with that carbon sequestration and carbon offset trading. I mean, maybe the council could make more money out of that rather than the ballpark figure we might get of 80 grand or something. I don't know. To me, I would rather have more time. I'd rather do an assessment. I'd rather do what Councillor Bain suggests, look at different options for the use of this land, and then we can make a proper decision with a report back from council staff.
Thank you, Councillor Riddington. I can see an amendment coming when he come out. Councillor White, please.
That's what I was going to do. I was going to foreshadow an amendment, a motion.
No, you when we come out, you can just move an amendment. That's
So
how.
we vote on that. Yeah. Okay.
Oh no, Scott's got to talk.
We're still in committee of the whole.
We're still committee of the whole, and what you do is you prepare what your amendment might be, and when we come out, you can move the amendment to the motion that's still before us. Councillor Butterfield, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd just like to speak to the motion. I actually lost where I was, but yeah, I think council has probably already considered the use or future use of the land, and made the decision that they have no use for it. And as for the environmental restrictions already on the wetlands, it'll make sure that it will be protected in the future. I can't see any positives for holding onto the land. Maybe I can be convinced otherwise, but at this stage I can't. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Butterfield. Any further speakers? Councillor Ferguson.
Yeah, just a quick question, if I may, Mr. Mayor. Just possible cost of keeping it. Do we rate ourselves on it? That'd be about the only cost. There'd be no maintenance with it.
Well, that's a good question. Yes, General Manager may have an answer.
Yeah, water and sewer fund pay rates on this. I'm not sure what they are, but yeah.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, the weed also was a cost to the weeds maintenance.
Sorry, can't hear. Councillor Saul, you start. And then we've got Councillor Ring.
Just to inform the actual weed management, that is a high cost to council to make sure we ensure our weeds are maintained.
Weeds are not maintained. Let's get rid of, I hope.
Correct, that's true.
Thank you.
Not maintained, but cold, I should say. Yes, the weeds are.
Mr. Trotter.
Mr. Trotter, could you give us some advice, please?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, we do currently maintain weeds on the land that we own. Also with properties like that, it's fencing and illegal dumping too that we all also have to contribute a fair bit of money to. So yes.
Thank you, Mr. Trotter. No further questions. Come to a point where someone might move. We come out of committee of the whole. Councillor Ferguson moves up. Seconder, please. Councillor Bridington, thank you. Any dissent? Oh, sorry, my mistake. Councillor Ring, you were going to speak, and you had your hand up before we come out, and I put that motion. Did you have something further you wish to add, or do you want to say it to open council?
I'll say it once we're, yeah. I can wait.
Okay, thank you. I put the motion. Is there any dissent? We're out of the committee of the whole now, and Councillor Ring, please.
I'll wait. Again, I just was going to speak if there was an amendment brought up.
Okay. So there's a motion that's before us. Is there any further amendments or speakers, please? Councillor Wyatt.
I'll foreshadow an amendment.
No, you do. You move the amendment now.
So
foreshadow.
I'm putting the amendment up, like they did to us before.
It's them and us.
Sorry, I thought Councillor Bain already put up an amendment. Sorry. Yeah, yes, I am putting up an amendment then.
I asked and he said no.
Yeah. You just help me with wording though, because I'm just a bit fatigued. The amendment is something along the lines of that. Number one, council investigate the potential for that parcel of land for inclusion into the New South Wales Biodiversity Offset Scheme. And number two is that sale of that land is conditional on using that land to maintain those water, environment and water values.
Yeah.
Yep.
Council
in the Biodiversity Offset Scheme.
Yeah, you can't sell it and also do biodiversity, so it's one or the other.
But you do sell it under Biodiversity Offset Scheme, so you can sell it.
But we haven't not resolving to sell it. You're resolving to sell it after we find that out. So we've got to be clear in the motion.
Yeah. So the part A is, just help me with the wording, please. Part A is to investigate potential for that parcel of land for inclusion into the Biodiversity Offset Scheme market. And part two of that is that if it can be put there, is that sale is conditional. So so we will sell that land on the condition that it can be added to that Biodiversity Offset Scheme to protect the environmental and water values.
Yep.
Something along those lines.
I
Like I'm
think I've got the
not
lines.
fully aware. I'm not fully aware on how the assessment process is undertaken, but
No, we just need to clarify what happens in what order. Mr. General Manager, if you get you won't sell the land until you get that biodiversity offset report, is what I see it happening.
Yeah.
And this is approving sale of land dependent on that report coming back.
Yeah, through Mr. Mayor, we've just been communicating, working out what might be the best way to go. If this is simply voted down by council, so you don't support it, which we're fine with, we would go and do that study anyway. We'll actually go and do that carbon credit study to see whether it actually has value or not. And looking at that, we'll then come back to council one way or the other. So it probably doesn't need any amendment at all. All it needs is for you to vote it down.
And the General Manager can't advise you how to vote. But he's giving you a possibility.
I'd like it recorded, please, as the amendment. And I just want to I'd like it recorded.
You want the amendment to continue? Okay.
Because and can I speak to it?
Yes, we need a seconder first. Councillor Riddington. Councillor White, please.
The intent of this amendment here is that it's still giving council the opportunity to sell that land for possibly a higher value than what is anticipated, because that biodiversity offset market is I think it's getting a bit it's getting higher value. Same with the carbon sequestration project, especially with blue carbon as well. So yeah, I'd sort of like to think outside the box a bit. So it's just not boo-hooing that we sell the land. It's actually acknowledging that there could be money to be made here, but environmental economics is a moneymaker. So that's the intention here. It's not to it's not to deny council an opportunity to make money and sell that land, but it is an opportunity to make money and to protect the values under environmental economics.
There's a motion on the screen, Councillor White. You're now agreeing with that.
Environmental and water values. I think the water values around the flooding of the lagoon there is a good one as well.
Where in that would you like to
so protect the environmental and water quality and water values? Environmental and water values? What are you laughing at? Okay, you can.
Right, we've got a second, and Councillor Riddington.
No, I'm
second.
Point of order, Mr. Mayor.
You can have a point of order.
Does this go now to Councillor Ferguson to accept as part of the motion?
Yes, but we'll allow Councillor White to speak to it first, and then that could be offered to Councillor Ferguson. Councillor White. Microphone, Councillor Ring.
No, I did speak to it before, which was that intention around using environmental economics here. So it's not denying council an opportunity to sell this land, get rid of the maintenance responsibility of the land, and deny council an opportunity to get some revenue. But it is also about using environmental economics to potentially make more money and protect those environmental values, which I think there's probably the flying fox habitat there as well, and those that live in East Kempsey would probably like them to be moved out to this area as well. And also there is money to be made in environmental economics, biodiversity offset, carbon sequestration, and blue carbon in particular, especially for agricultural sector. So thanks for bringing that up.
Thank you, Councillor White. Councillor Ferguson, are you willing to accept the amendment into your motion and become the motion?
Can I make a comment prior to accepting it, or have I got to say yes or no?
You can make a comment in a form of a question, I guess.
Well, yes. If we did find that there was an income to be generated off it and it was significant, point 2 says sell the land on the condition. If we can generate an income off it and be in control of its values, do we need to stipulate that land is to then be sold?
Councillor White, please.
I would think.
Question.
So you sell it. So you see that well, I'm not, I don't have my head right around the biodiversity offset scheme, but that would be my understanding, is that we sell that land to the person that is going to use it for the biodiversity offset, and then that gets put on the title of the land. They have to maintain that. So developer, say developer down the Hunter Valley is doing some work, they need to find an offset for their development. They go and spend 100 grand, maybe a million on this property, and that gets put to the land. Like the Keith Andrews property. Yeah.
So further explanation, Councillor White, from the General Manager on this issue, thanks.
Yeah, through Mr. Mayor. If it's actually suitable to go into the biodiversity offset scheme, it's actually then traded. So from a staff point of view, we're better to do number one first and then work out whether in the long term we are better to hold it and let the trading happen on the land, or whether we're better to sell it. But we won't know that until we've actually done the actual report on the land itself. So from a staff point of view, you're better to go with just one.
Okay.
And let's see where we go from there.
Okay, well then I'll take off number 2.
Would you like to withdraw point 2?
Yeah.
And Councillor Ferguson, would you now accept point 1 only?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I'd like to accept point 1.
Thank you. And Councillor Butterfield, please.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a couple of quick questions. My first one was, had council looked at the biodiversity offset scheme? And obviously they hadn't. I don't know anything about all this biodiversity offset scheme and carbon neutral, that sort of stuff. But what if we were to do that study, would it make it harder to sell to the potential buyer? And if we were to keep it, what sort of money would we make it off it, possibly?
Mr. General Manager.
Yeah, through Mr. Mayor.
Please.
Yeah, we won't know a lot of those answers until we do the study. We have actually done this assessment on another block of land for council, which we're actually looking at putting up for sale. And by going down the biodiversity offset scheme, we're probably going to have anything from 3 to 8 times the value of actually selling the land by keeping it ourselves and putting it in the biodiversity offset scheme. So going through that process allows us to work out what is the best situation. So we hadn't considered it for this before we put this report up. I think it's actually a very good suggestion. We do this and let's have a look at it. Let's get the study done, and that'll tell us whether it's actually worth keeping for that reason. We might find that we can get general fund to buy it off water at a very, very cheap price, and general fund can actually get the value of it.
Thank you very much, Mr. General Manager, for your crystal balling and your advice. Councillor Ring, did you want to speak again? No? Thank you. I thought I saw your hand up, sorry. Any further debate? Councillor Ferguson will then close the debate if there's no further debate.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. No, I think we've come full circle on this one, and it sounds like we're on the right track now. So thank you for the good discussion.
Thank you, Councillor Ferguson. No further debate, so we'll now put the motion. Is there any dissent? There is no dissent. It's declared it carried unanimously. And that brings us to the end of the council meeting. Councillor Riddington.
Can I please ask a question before you close the meeting, Mr. Mayor?
About something on the agenda items?
Yeah.
You may.
Thank you. I don't know if we should talk about this off microphone, but how do we do a rescission motion to one of the things?
We'll close the meeting and I can explain that to you, or get Mr. Farragut to explain it to you. It can be done. Thank you. And I thank those councillors who will be staying back to consider the social housing forum we're putting together to try and come up with a notice of motion on helping council take action on social housing in the Kempsey Shire community. So thank you to all those councillors who are staying back for that. And I declare the meeting closed, and Mr. General Manager will now give you some instructions.